We've all been told our whole lives to stay away from saturated fats and fats because they're bad for you, they'll clog your arteries and they'll give you a heart attack. Unfortunately, the masses of this population have been misinformed, and in this video I'm going to explain to you not just that saturated fat and fat isn't unhealthy, but that it's actually healthy and essential if you want to be a healthy person. I'm going to cover why you need fats and saturated fats in our diet. I'm also going to share the myth behind saturated fats being bad for you and where all that actually originated from in the first place. And then I'm going to talk a little more about saturated fats and a little bit about cholesterol as well. I do want to be clear by saying that I don't want you to eat a higher fat diet or a moderate fat diet because I do keto, because I do not follow a ketogenic diet. A lot of people out there who are debunking the low fat diet, which is exactly what I'm going to do in this video, are only doing it not because they want to help you, but because they want you to do a keto diet or buy their keto program. I don't do keto and I don't sell a keto program, so this video is here just so we can all learn what the actual truth is. As a little bonus as well for the people that want to stay until the end of the video, I'm going to share with you how to know if you're eating enough fat or if you're eating not enough fat. So I'll give you a simple calculation to work that out for yourself. And then I'm going to list just a few fats that I recommend you eat. Let's do a little comparison between a low carb diet and a low fat diet. And I don't want to go too deep into this, but I do want to cover it. So there's actually a video, an extremely stupid video on CBS, which I watched on YouTube, which you'll probably see in the search if you search this topic. If you search low fat versus a low carb diet, you'll probably find the video. It's basically a woman talking about how you need to eat a high carb diet and a low fat diet if you want to lose the most weight. And that's wrong for so many reasons, and I can explain those reasons in a second. Not just that insulin is really high when you eat carbohydrates, and insulin is low when you're eating a low carbohydrate diet, which, just to say as well, I'm not against. I eat everything in moderation. That's what I choose to do. That's my style of eating. The issue with what this woman was saying is the fact that the study she was referencing had 19 participants. I can help you with a lot of things, but I can't fix stupid. If you think that a study that has 19 people in it, just 19 people, has any validity whatsoever, then I can't help you, I can't fix stupid. Which leads me on to something that I often say, which is sometimes you have to follow not the science, but the experience. And I am a science-based guy. I do read studies and I based a lot of my recommendations off of studies that have been done. So I do believe in science. It's not that I think it's wrong. It's that sometimes the experience actually outweighs what the studies say. And here's a brilliant example. And we'll talk about health in a little bit, but just for now, even if we're just talking about fat loss, who are the leanest athletes in the world? Out of all the athletes, who are the athletes who have the lowest body fat levels? And the answer is bodybuilders. Professional bodybuilders have to diet down to 4%, 5%, 6%, 7% body fat. And to do that, a lot of them use low carb diets. I've said before, I don't even recommend a low carb diet. It works. But one thing I can promise you is that no bodybuilder who gets to 4 or 5% body fat ever uses a low fat diet. And this is not a recent thing. In fact, in the 50s, the bodybuilders would do low carb, and even more so in the 60s. Almost every bodybuilder in that time was doing some form of low carb diet, but none of them ever did low fat. And no bodybuilder right now does low fat diets because they don't work. So you can cherry pick whatever study you want to pick, but look at the thousands and thousands of lean people who have actually achieved a physique what's extremely lean but shredded, and look at those physiques. Those people either eat all the macronutrients or some of them may do low carb, but none of them do low fat because it doesn't work. If you're doing a low fat diet, you're going to experience things like low testosterone, which obviously we need for burning fat, we obviously need for building muscle especially, and we need for just energy levels to feel good, because we use fat as a fuel source and fat regulates your hormones. So if you have a low fat diet, you're going to be in big trouble. This leads me on to talking about where the myth in the first place come from, because if you ask most people will tell you that fat and saturated fat is bad for you. In fact, if you go to your doctor, a lot of doctors still believe this, and this is why I'm totally not against doctors, and I don't want to go too far into this, but a lot of doctors really don't know what they're talking about. There isn't many doctors that even know much about nutrition, and it's because those doctors are just reading from the same textbooks. They all have the same 4-year degree and they're all reading the same information. Well, if you're reading information that isn't correct or it's outdated, then of course you're going to give bad advice. So just because you have the title of doctor, it doesn't mean you actually know what you're talking about. So this has basically been going on for around 60-70 years, this myth, and it come from in the late 1950s. I believe it was around 1958, 1959, and it was from a man called Ancel Keys, and he basically was heavily linked to the sugar industry. He was a man in authority, had a good position, and he also would profit from people eating more refined carbohydrates and more sugars. So what he basically did is he did a study and he manipulated that data, but not just manipulated that data, worse than that, he actually changed the data so that it would look like saturated fats and fats were bad for you and sugars wasn't bad for you. So obviously if you profit from sugars and carbohydrates and you want that industry to blow up, what do? If you have most people believing that saturated fat is bad for you, less people are going to eat saturated fats and more people are going to eat carbohydrates and sugars. When the reality is eating too much sugar is what's causing the problem. It's the sugar and carbohydrates that are giving you more inflammation, that are making you have more swelling in the body, that are making you have higher insulin levels, and higher insulin equals more body fat. And also when you're eating sugar, your liver can only take in so much. So what's going to happen is the rest is going to spill over and then that gets stored as body fat. Fats and healthy saturated fats, because you can eat unhealthy saturated fats, which are also linked to heart disease and heart problems. Unsaturated fats that are bad for you, of course. But sugar is heavily linked to heart attacks and heart disease, far more than even bad unsaturated fats. And if you look back, when sugar consumption went up, so did heart attacks and heart disease. I still can't believe that we're 60 years later, we're still misinformed. We've still got health professionals today telling people not to eat a high fat diet or even a moderate fat diet, that you need to eat a lower fat diet. I can't believe that we're still in this situation, and it shows why most people believe certain things and it's simply not true. I mean, people still think that you need to eat breakfast in the morning, and there's nothing wrong with eating breakfast in the morning, but there are so many more benefits to skipping breakfast, but people still believe breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So conventional thinking, what the masses think, is usually wrong. The man was genuinely just an out and out absolute scumbag, and what he actually did was he did this study in 22 different countries, and what he found was that 5 or 6 of those countries, the data leaned a little bit more towards fats being the problem. So the other countries that he had left over, he basically didn't publish that data. So he took what he wanted, the 5 or 6 countries that actually showed in his favour, and then he published that data. He didn't publish the data from the other countries, and all the other countries, if you look at that data, actually shows not just that saturated fat is not bad for you, that actually people who don't eat enough saturated fats and fats have more chance of heart attacks. And remember, this is information from the same study from the same man. He just manipulated the data to get the results what he wants. And that is the problem sometimes with some of these studies, is people miss things, and you can be really good at reading through studies and looking who funded the study and things like that. But it is really easy for someone to manipulate the data and for people not to see it, hence why we're in this scenario. I'm absolutely not going to take this political, and I'm certainly not going to share any of my views on certain things, not on this YouTube channel anyway. But one thing I want to say, and I'm saying it because I genuinely care about everybody, and that is that just because someone of authority says something, it doesn't mean it's true. Just because the government show you certain graphs of certain things that are going on in the world right now, certain words that we're not allowed to say on platforms like YouTube, doesn't mean it's actually true. And I just think people should reconsider when you're looking at data. If anything in this video so far has been helpful in any way, then if you could just click the like button, it really helps me out, lets me know that I'm doing a good job, and it also helps to get more people to see this video and help more people. One type of fat that is often said to be really bad for you is called palmitic acid, and that's about 50% of your cell membrane. It's also found in really healthy fats such as nuts and fish, and this is what I'm trying to say, that people don't know what they're talking about. you should literally not listen to most people, because people have no idea what they're talking about. This is a fatty acid that gets a bad rap, yet it's in some of the healthiest fats in the world, and it makes up 50% of your cell membrane. It's extremely important. It's not bad for you. Without saturated fats in your diet, you'd have a lower immune system, which we know the importance of having a high immune system in the world that we live in today with everything that's going on in the world. You also can't make testosterone, estrogen, and things like cortisol, hormones like that, you can't make without saturated fat. It's very important that we eat saturated fat. The key is that we all eat the right type of saturated fat, which I said earlier, I'm going to tell you at the end of the video some fats that I recommend. You have to remember that if you didn't eat fat ever again, you cut fat from your diet, you would actually die. Your body can't live without fat. And if you cut carbohydrates to zero, you could actually survive. And I don't recommend, like I've said before, that you do that. I'm just saying that it proves how important fats are when you cannot live without them. Carbohydrates are not that important really. You don't actually need to eat them. I did promise that I would quickly touch on cholesterol, which is a separate video in itself, but just give me a quick 10-20 seconds. So basically, cholesterol is another one of those things that we are told is really bad for us. And we take drugs just so that companies can make loads of profit, of course, to lower your cholesterol when it's not necessary. And those same drugs also give you a whole world of other problems. But the point is, when you eat cholesterol, such as in egg yolks, a lot of people don't eat the egg yolks because they're full of cholesterol. When you ingest or consume cholesterol, that doesn't raise your blood cholesterol. People think that when you eat cholesterol, that increases your cholesterol. It doesn't do that. They're two separate things. Basically, when you have too much cholesterol, or you've consumed too much cholesterol, your body basically just produces less. It's the same as what I've talked about in my high protein diet videos, where if you eat too much protein, it's not bad for the kidneys because your kidney will just get rid of what it doesn't want. It's the same thing. If you have too much cholesterol, your body will make less cholesterol because you have too much of it. Cholesterol is also absolutely essential for you making testosterone. So testosterone, as we know, is one of the most important hormones. Without that, guess what? You can't build muscle, you can't lose body fat. If you have low testosterone, you're going to feel crap all of the time. So again, it's one of those things, oh, you must have low cholesterol. Low cholesterol is bad for you, don't eat it. But then we prove that you need cholesterol to make testosterone. There's so many other things I could go into on that, but we'll save that for another video. There is a little myth that I do want to just debunk, which is that eating fat causes you to be fat, and that's not true at all. Fat that you consume is not the same fat that is on your body. It's not to say that fat can't be stored as body fat if you're eating too many calories throughout the day. Of course it can, but actually I love fat because you don't crash when you eat fat. You can use fat as an energy source, much like carbohydrates that you can use as an energy source. With carbohydrates, the problem is you have a massive spike in blood sugar, which usually causes you to feel tired or groggy later in the day. When you consume a little bit more fat and a little less carbs, your energy levels are more stable throughout the day. Because when you're using fat as energy, it's slow releasing. You're slowly using that fat throughout the day, whereas carbohydrates is a quick, big insulin spike, but then we're coming back down again. And that's why I typically like to keep my carbs moderate throughout the day. A very good reason that you certainly would never want to go low fat is the fact you'd be hungry, and it relates back to the hormones again. Hormones such as ghrelin and leptin are hunger hormones. They're going to cause you to be more hungry if you're not eating enough fat. And if we want to talk about weight loss or losing body fat, then it's about how many calories you're eating throughout the whole day. It's not about fat has more calories or carbs do this or proteins do that. It's really all about how many calories you're eating as a whole, and you need to make sure that you have enough protein and enough fat to regulate hormones and things that we've talked about, and then basically fill the rest in with carbs, because as we've said, carbs don't matter as much. But if you're looking to lose body fat, then it's all about the calories that you take in throughout the day. If you've stayed this far into the video, then well done, and as I promised, I'll give you a calculation so that you can work out what range of fat you need to be in per day. So what you need to do is take your body weight in pounds, multiplied by 0.3 to 0.4, and you'll get two numbers. So for me, for example, I weigh 160 pounds. If I multiply that by 0.4, the number that I get is 48. So that's 48, and if I multiply 160 pounds by 0.4, the number I get is 64. So anywhere in that range, 48 to 64 grams of fat per day is where my fat is going to be optimal. Some good fats are things like whole milk, almond butter, grass-fed butter, coconut oil, nut, dark chocolate, avocados. There's some good fats to consume.